Hey guys, we are back with a another conversation and with Megan. And today we're going to be in this topic, we're going to be talking about working with fearful rescue horses with positive reinforcement, or just fearful horses in general, or rescues in general with positive reinforcement. So I wanted to talk about this with Megan because she has examples and or her own horses that she's worked with as well as other people's horses that have been fearful, and some of them are rescues, and just kind of wanted to talk about our experiences that both of us have had working with these kinds of horses and how positive reinforcement goes with that. Especially, we can dive into maybe the horse is reluctant to take food by hand. Maybe they're worried about approaching you. Maybe they're just scared of people in general. How does that work when we're using positive reinforcement? So, Megan, to start us off, maybe you could tell us a little bit of, um, I don't know, you could start us off with a little bit of story with your mini. I know he was fearful and also a rescue, and you could kind of share with us kind of that journey and how that looked for you guys, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, for sure. So Optimus was for sure a fearful rescue. I would say he wasn't obviously the most fearful that they could be. When I first saw him at the rescue, none of the mini horses actually came up to me, besides a couple, and those actually weren't the ones that I was like more drawn to. So Optimus, I never touched or even interacted with Optimus. I was just like chose him from a field. I was like, sure, I'll take that one.
I'll
Um,
pick that one.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was like, what am I getting more of a gravitational pull toward? Um, and then when we came home, he was still fearful, but he was a bit more interactive than when he was at the rescue. So he would come over to you, kind of investigate you a little bit, but he was still very jumpy. If you moved too fast or you weren't like intentional with your movements, he would do little jump backs and he would definitely be more weary of you. Um, that in general warmed up. He warmed up very quickly for what I was expecting him to. But then we still had all of the training that we had where he was really fearful of the halter, um, any new objects I would introduce him to, any sudden movements I would make, or even if we were just hanging out or I was doing work around the barn and he wasn't totally expecting me to come out of a doorway because I was just minding my business and doing chores around the barn. I would give him like a mini heart attack from just walking out of the stall door into the hallway where he was. Um, so that was kind of a lot of the stuff that he had to work through. And I would say probably the biggest thing was doing things cooperatively, like doing his halter cooperatively. That way you're not just having to because I would have to quickly corner him in his stall so I could get his halter on to do some necessities. And that honestly just broke my heart every single time. You know, you had to do that because, of course, that wasn't helping that trust building relationship and that whole process and filling up that piggy bank with good experiences. So, really replacing those experiences with stuff that he really knows how to do. That's predictable, and he knows that I'm not going to be doing those things to him. Were like the biggest change.
I noticed with horses that I've worked with, clients' horses or my own, that have been really fearful, even if they're not like rescues or feral horses. We can have very fearful, just everyday domestic horses that have been bred and raised, maybe I don't know, there doesn't have to be this big tragic background. Sometimes genetically they are really spooky and nervous around any changes. And I've noticed that for all of these horses, predictability is such a huge factor, especially in the beginning. So, of creating a sense of predictability and a sense of leads to creating a space of safety. So it helps the horse feel safer because they know what's coming next, right? So when we're doing these training sessions with more fearful horses, a lot of times I'll have people sit on the other side of a fence, and because that adds protection for the horse a lot of times. And then we will find a bucket or a feed pan that the horse is really comfortable with, and I'll just have them feed the horse like into that bucket or that feed pan, and we create really slow motion and we just repeat. And it's just this thing that happens over and over and over again really consistently, and the horse is able to go, oh, I know it's coming. I know it's happening. I can relax. So then when we get them to that place of relaxation where they're able to understand what's happening, we can then start adding a little bit of criteria. Maybe it's, can I just lift up this halter? And I'm talking about like really spooky horses, like you move a hand too fast and they're gone. Um, and I'm thinking of a specific case that comes to mind where we were working with an extremely fearful feral horse who he wasn't off, like he wasn't like a Mustang, like off the range, but he had um he basically was. He was just left in a big basically feral domestic herd that and he'd not had like any handling, and then he was really traumatized, and so you couldn't lift a hand, you couldn't breathe too hard. If you coughed, he was gone, like gone, gone. And it was really we were able to make so much progress by creating a safe place for him. And so we had our training environment that was always the same. It was always the same spot. We always had the same bucket. She even the handler, because we were doing this virtually, actually I was coaching her virtually, and I made sure we talked about wearing similar clothes every day, not changing all of a sudden to a bright red or a bright green, anything, or bright orange or whatever, bright white even, trying to keep things pretty neutral and calm. And this is where we started though. So, and eventually we worked up to, which is where you guys are at with Optimus now, where you're able to start introducing more unpredictability, some more variability in what you're doing. You don't have to tiptoe on eggshells anymore because you've built up that piggy bank, right? That trust piggy bank account where the horse is like, oh, I know this person, they're safe, we're good. And also, of course, there's a lot of other supportive stuff that we do for horses that are struggling, but that's a whole nother, like we can dive into that in a little bit. But that's been my experience and a way that I've had a lot of great success working with these really fearful horses. And I know you and Optimus did a very similar process where you were very methodical and very consistent and predictable for him. And then now, where would you say you guys are at? Like, how are things going?
Mostly like you wouldn't think anything was going on prior. It's to where I could switch things up in the routine pretty whenever I feel like we
Yeah.
can, like we're able to, and whenever I want to try something else. And he's now really good with those transitions. Um, and jumping off of the predictability thing, it reminds me of this one horse that I also worked with where predictability was like literally like the biggest thing, where that was a much more fearful horse to where wouldn't want to approach or even like take food from your hand. Um, so that was definitely a routine that we started that horse with, and it was the same every single time. And we would only make changes in very gradual approximations, small approximations. And we also saw that if myself or the owner made a jump in that routine, especially at first, the horse would just be like, "Okay, it's too much now. It's different. I don't like it." um, so yeah, I definitely agree with that. That predictability is like probably one of the biggest things. And of course, down the line, then you can work in different
Mhm.
variables gradually, and then get to be just like a normal, unquote, normal horse. But especially in the beginning, yeah.
Yeah, because we're trying to create, well, these horses that are just scared of their own shadow, right? They're scared of everything. They're scared of being alive. They don't feel comfortable in their own skin. They're not existing in a comfortable place. Their fight, flight, freeze, like all of that is just on overdrive, and they are hypervigilant all the time usually. They're just not really comfortable. And this is not a good quality of life for them to have. And so when we talk about training, we want to be working in the green zone bordering into the yellow when we're trying to expand, right? So we're talking specifically where we need to help the horse expand their tolerance and their comfortability, whatever, how comfortable they are experiencing new things and out in the world. So these horses that are so fearful, I mean, their green zone is like nothing, right? There's like basically no green zone, really. It's all yellow and red. So we need to create a green zone. We're creating a space where they can go oh, and relax and just go, okay, I got this. I know what's going to happen. I know this is good. And then we're bringing in all that counter conditioning or that classical conditioning, that positive reinforcement. It's such a superpower where we're incorporating all these good things, this food, if the horse likes scratches, but I doubt in the situation they do. So really food is what we're working with mostly, plus safety. So we're offering companionship, safety, and we're bringing all this food. So we're making this a good experience. It's good and awesome things. We're making it safe through the predictability and the consistency and just us making accommodations to help the horse. So we start creating this green zone. And then we ask them to slowly expand that zone. So at first, it'll feel a little bit yellow because they're like, ooh, this is new and scary. I don't know. And then after a little bit, that classical conditioning comes in and they're like, okay, this is cool. I got this and I can do this. And now it becomes part of that green zone. So that green zone gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And before you know it, we've got a horse that is able to exist in a world where, and they feel like part of it, right? And they're not afraid of everything. Now, of course, genetics play a role and a lot of different factors play a role here, but that is the goal. And that's what we're ultimately working towards. And it's really cool to watch horses grow and feel more comfortable, not just in training and interacting with people, but just in their own skin in general. I know I've seen for you and Optimus, but Optimus specifically, your mini, and of course other horses too. I've really enjoyed watching him just become more comfortable and just yeah, just growing and comfortable in his own body, but also in his environment.
I know. I also love seeing that. Or when you could, the celebrations of those milestones of fearful horses kind of coming out and creating, like getting their personality, and it could kind of be coming out of like a slight state of shutdown or just so much fear that they are just protecting themselves at all time, and then to finally start to relax and see their personality and different ways that they interact with the environment and different things. That's always a really big celebration
Yeah.
to experience.
Yeah, the personality really starts to come out. It's so much fun to see. Uh, and even horses that are not necessarily fearful towards people, but just the environment. Like I've got one of those, and I've worked with many horses that are just generally really spooky, right? They're just really, a lot of times we tend to attribute this to they're just high strung or they have a lot of energy, but they're not really comfortable, right? Everything scares them. Um, this same process applies to those horses as well, and is really, I love the power of positive reinforcement in helping build their confidence and helping bring out that personality and their eagerness to explore the world around them and just more confident, brave learners, which could mean just exploring, but it could also mean in the training session itself is really cool to see. I Yeah, I love it. I love working with horses like this. I love working with horses that just need a reason to trust. They need a reason. They need to be shown that it's safe, that life is safe, they will be okay. We've got them. Um, Sadly, though, and I'm sure you've experienced this too, all too often we're taught in the horse world that if a horse is really spooky or feeling uncomfortable or really fearful, that that means that they're not trusting us and that we need to step in and be a better leader, right? And they need to turn their attention to us and to be more respectful of us because if they're worrying about everything around them, that means it's like an insult to us, right? We take it so personally.
Yeah,
What are your thoughts on that?
I definitely see that come up too. That's definitely a concern with some clients that I've worked with where they I mean, even just hearing things from other professionals and other people that surround them as they are working with their horse, they tell them a bunch of different things, and that could lead toward them, what you just said, basically, that the horse isn't thinking of them as a leader. And then they start recommending these things like maybe try like round penning or, all of those different things. When in reality, you want to look at how, like, how your interactions are with that horse and think about the predictability and thinking about being someone that the horse does trust, but getting there in a different way and
Not
having
forcing
that,
it.
yes, of course, and letting that just grow organically with the interactions that you guys have together. Because if you do those other things that people might recommend, I mean, it just involves so much force. And in the long run, like that's so not helpful or
Yeah.
what your end goal is.
Yeah, like you could demand that the horse pay attention to you. I don't know that that qualifies as them learning to trust you so much as that they learn you're the bigger, badder, scarier thing than the environment,
Yeah.
right? Because if every time they're spooky and hyper fixated on the environment and just like, something's gonna come and get me, and then you're like, nah, pay attention to me.
Right. No, I pay no
I
attention.
I know I'm the
I
bad
don't
guy.
care.
I am the bigger, scarier thing.
Mhm.
Ignore your environment, pay attention to the bigger threat, which is me now, because you're trapped in here with me and you've got to
Mhm.
pay attention to me or else. And that's such a sad thing, but it's well intended. Like most of the time, people do this with the hopes of helping their horse, helping them feel more comfortable, helping them cope better with their environment, have a better quality of life, because it's devastating to watch your horse be miserable and have a poor quality of life as if life scares them, right? If they're walking around like, oh my gosh, the wind blew. Oh my gosh, the trees, the shades are looking different. The leaves are looking different today. Or, oh my gosh, you moved your hand or you coughed, right? That's not a good quality of life for this horse. And so it's well intended, but unfortunately, the results or the process for the horse is often very different than we're led to believe. And also, I don't know that, well, I should say that I think we take it too personally. I think we see this horse in this arena or the round pen or the pasture or whatever, we're trying to do a training session, and they're not paying attention to us, and they're like, well, this is rude. And we're taking it really personally, right? Like it's something having to do with us, that we're inadequate in some capacity, that this horse is, whatever, doing that thing, or it's disrespectful towards us, when in reality it has nothing to do with us, unless they're
Right.
fearful of us, but then it does, still different. Um, yeah. And so I think if we could take it less personally and realize that this is about helping the horse have a better quality of life. And then also, additionally, building the trust in a healthy, force free way with us so that they can actually look to us as guidance. They can actually rely on us if they are a little bit worried. Because I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, any of the horses in my herd right now, but specifically a couple, but any of the horses in my herd, if something spooked them, the first thing they do, where's my human? And they come and look for me and they come and stand with me and I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, help me out with this. Because
What do you want me to do? What do you
yeah,
think?
yeah. And I could so easily interpret that as them, oh, I'm the leader. And so they're looking to me for guidance. But two things I have to say about that. One, I did not achieve that through forcing it. I
Yeah.
achieved that with lots and lots of positive reinforcement. And then two, I don't really view it as them coming to me as a leader so much as it's that person is safe. I can rely on her. She's got my back in in a horse, whatever the horse is thinking way.
Yes.
I will go stand with her because it's always good when I'm with her. And that's that superpower, that classical conditioning superpower happening there. And I love that. And we could say that, well, maybe that is, good leadership, right? Somebody we can trust to guide us and keep us safe and to provide us a good quality of life and, so on and so forth. Um, but yeah, it's such a fascinating topic and conversation and how we can help horses with positive reinforcement. What would you say are some of your I guess let's get down into the nitty-gritty of specifically using positive reinforcement with feral horses without going too much into like a training plan. What are some techniques that people could use, or tips and tricks, I should say, that can help them introduce positive reinforcement to a horse that is, let's say this horse is fearful enough that they're scared of hands and scared of people in general. They're hard to catch, if not impossible to catch. And if you were to cough, they would be gone. Like, let's go that far. We're that fearful. How would we start with a horse like this?
Yeah, so again, there's one horse that comes to mind that really did really well with this process, and that horse still did not like to take food from your hand. They weren't really wanting anything to do with you. They kept their distance and were just very wary. Um, so in that situation, we set up this pattern where we had a couple buckets. We were in the horse's pen with them, but you could for sure do it in protected contact along the fence line and everything. In this situation, though, with what we were given, this is what we did. Um, and so you are still using positive reinforcement, but we did not use a clicker at this point yet. We were just wanting the horse to engage with us and start to make gestures, yeah, gestures toward us. So we would just stand in the pen with the horse. We had our buckets, we still had our food pouch, and the horse would look at us or make a gesture toward us, lean, any curiosity that the horse gave toward us. We would put food in the food pan that we were using, set the food pan on the ground, and we would walk as far away as the horse needed for then that horse to go get the food. So stepping back, however far, for that horse to feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And that could be better to be safe than sorry. You should step back very far to
Well,
make sure that the horse feels comfortable.
yeah, and you can watch the body language, right, and their communication first, if whether or not they're willing to eat, because if you're too close, they're probably going to stop and they're going to leave. But you can also look for things like head turns, tongue out, licking and chewing, rubbing the leg, tail swishing, wide eye, tension around the eye, wide nostrils, or tension around the muzzle and the nostrils. There's different signs you can look for if the horse is like he's going to eat or she's going to eat, but like worried about it, worried about how close you are.
Still very cautious about it.
Yeah, exactly. Which then brings, the reminder that, our presence in this case is aversive. It's unpleasant for them because they don't want us that close. And so we are incorporating a certain level of relief from that to help reinforce those behaviors. So you stepped towards me or you looked at me, I'm going to drop some food. So we got some good classical conditioning happening. And we're going to counter condition our presence. We're going to start making it more enjoyable, more pleasant for them. But also, I am going to add the relief here of me stepping back and giving you your space. And then over time, gradually decreasing how much we need to step back and
Yes.
or how much movement the horse is making towards us. And so we can also incorporate those things as well. And the idea here is that pretty quickly, if we're doing our job right, or it just really depends on the horse too. I can't give you an exact timeline, of course. We won't need to take steps back anymore because they're going to start looking forward to us being there. Our presence will no longer be an aversive thing. It's going to be an enjoyable thing. Um, yeah, we'll start building that trust and start building that good association there. So that's always really fun when we get to that stage and the horse like sees you and comes up or like, oh my gosh, yes, we made it. That's like a huge milestone. I love
A
that
lot of
stage.
hard work paid
Yeah.
off. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the routine that worked really well for that horse. And yeah, just like you said, we started not having to step back as far, and we would also be able to stand and wait for the horse to come about like halfway to us. And then until they're much more closer to us, we can drop the food in the food pan, walk away. And then we also got to the point where we were starting to hold the food pan. So the horse wasn't eating from the ground and we were physically holding the food pan. So the horse would of course have to be comfortable enough to be in that close of proximity to you. and eat in that distance. But then, but then, yeah, then we just kept doing this pattern where we would just go from pan to pan to other places in the pen and do the same pattern. And then we were able to, the horse was able to eat while we were holding the food pan, and then we were able to work up to doing more stuff like hand feeding as well.
Yeah, I love that. That's really cool. I like to teach horses that are really fearful about touch and stuff because that's usually in that next stage. I like to teach them through cooperative training where they are actually the one that initiates the touch, which we kind of we do things pretty backwards when it comes to horse training in a lot of cases where okay, so we have this really fearful horse, we put him in a pen, they can't escape, and we demand they pay attention to us, and then we demand that they, and I say demand as in it can look anything from we apply some light pressure until they look at us, right? It could be very minimal. It doesn't have to be, I'm not talking abusive. I'm not talking like overt, but we could go all the way up there. Of course, we could have the whips out and we can chase them until they, whatever. So there's extremes of both ends, right? Just there's bad training on both sides of things. But either way, in those situations, like they don't really want to be there with us. They're not haven't chosen to be there. And then we're going to make it unpleasant for them not to acknowledge us. And then eventually we're going to work up to it's going to be unpleasant if they don't let us touch them. So none of that involves them choosing us, right? Choosing to engage with us. And again, I love going back and talking about like how awesome positive reinforcement is in classical conditioning. It's so amazing to build that trust organically in a way that the horse has a choice and they are choosing to engage with me or you, and they are choosing to initiate that touch. They are choosing to meet you at the gate. They are choosing to do all of these things. It's part of that process. And I love that in that the trust and the relationship that builds, which I don't know. I love it. I love positive reinforcement, and obviously, it's what I do a lot of. But again, we incorporate other things, and we look at everything, which brings me to, and I'd love to hear your perspective on this too. Is a lot of times fearful horses, especially chronically fearful, like if you've been doing a lot of really great work, you've been very patient, you've been really slow with the process, you've let the horse really have a choice in it, and you're still struggling with your horse being extremely spooky all the time or just really resisting any kind of engagement with you, this can really link up to management problems and or health problems. There's so many horses I know where it was a long, brutal process to even get them to the point where you could touch them, only to find out this horse was in critical amounts of chronic pain and that they were hiding very well. There was no obvious thing on the outside. They weren't like gaping wounds or anything. It was something going on internally. But they couldn't help the horse with it because they couldn't touch them. So we have to follow the Lima and the humane hierarchy and make sure that their welfare needs are being taken care of. But anyway, all of that is to bring it back to the behavior will represent a lot of times what's going on for them physically, because a horse that is suffering with pain, and it could be coming from the gut, it could be coming from things like arthritis, it could be coming from neurological stuff like EPM. I know a lot of EPM horses that are super spooky and nervous and hypervigilant all the time. It could be coming from a lot of things, right? Teeth problems, hoof problems. So with these horses that are dealing with underlying pain, we can train and train and train and train all day long. And you can be putting so much work into helping build trust with this horse and all of this. And then the horse can still feel really fearful. And it has nothing to do with you. Again, don't take this personally. A lot of times this is coming from how they're feeling physically, because a horse is a sitting duck that is compromised, right? Their brain is telling them, their body is telling them, I am compromised. I'm compromised. If a lion shows up, I'm the first one getting eaten. I better run first. So this is where that hypervigilance often comes from. So if your horse is struggling chronic, like just very anxious all the time, I usually start digging into possible medical causes, or could be nutrient deficiencies, yeah. Could be neurologic, could be hoof care, could be something else entirely. Now, of course, when you can't touch your horse, this when you can't touch your horse, this can be, if you're working at that extreme of a level, then this is where I'm going to say, as a behavior consultant, that you need to be talking to a behavior consultant and doing consultations, and or a veterinary behaviorist, one of those two. Somebody who understands the complexities of both the physical side of things and, of course, the welfare part, but also the behavior part at a deep, deep level. And so when you can't even touch your horse and you're concerned that something is physically wrong, we need to get a full team on board. But for everybody else that is, the horses, they're making progress in the training, but the horse is just nervous all the time, we really need to start looking at, where is this coming from? Where is that nervousness coming from? Especially if you're working with a trainer and you've been consistent, you've been putting all this stuff into practice. You're like, yeah, Adele, I get it. Or Megan, I get it. But also my horse is still fearful. We need to start looking for underlying causes. Um, yeah. So do you have anything to add to that, Megan?
Yeah, definitely, because we could then have the correct plan. We could have, the best people on the team. You could refine your training plan and make so many adjustments to it. Yet, if you are still having those hiccups and those setbacks constantly, then of course it's time to reevaluate and see where that pain could be coming from. And then, like you said, it's really hard when you don't have that access to touch your horse, or you have to take into consideration, if you do want to do something, how much of that will come out of like that trust piggy bank that you guys have made. So if you do want to do an exam with some professional, yet your horse is going to go over threshold, and there's ways you could, do all of the prep work to make sure that the horse is calm and prepared. But if it's still going to be a little unpleasant, think about how much that might take out of your trust piggy bank, and then of course have a plan then to rebuild it afterwards.
Yeah. Which is really the really cool part about those piggy banks and why we use that analogy, because there's been so many times where something terrible, like it's just a really unpleasant experience for one of my horses, but we spend day in and day out building that trust and having all those deposits into the piggy bank. And then that stressful, unpleasant, even painful or dangerous kind of situation shows up. And they're willing, I mean, they trust me through it, and we get through it and we make it as low stress and as positive as possible, but it's still a terrible situation. Not fun for anybody. And they bounce back so quickly, and it's amazing. It's beautiful. And, I'm in the moment, I'm like, oh gosh, here goes all the training. And they constantly amaze me.
Yeah.
Yeah, they
Or like,
constantly amaze me with bouncing right
yeah.
back.
Yeah.
So,
Or like, even in the situation, if it's still as low stress as you can make it, you could see the horse is struggling, yet they're still trying hard for you because you have that trust history and that piggy bank, that they're like, this isn't going well, but it ends up okay with you. So I'll hang around. Let's see what happens. Yet they're still fearful and they look for us for that support, but you see that they're really trying.
yeah, I'll give you a real life example of this that just happened actually with one of mine. We had the equine dentist here, and she we have a start button. This horse doesn't like having other people around. Like, she doesn't like having medical stuff. She had a bunch of medical stuff as a foal, and after that was like, nah, I'm done. No more medical stuff. So we've done a lot of cooperative, intravenous, like injections and muscular injections practice, and she has a start button and she knows how to do it, and she's beautiful about it. But this situation in particular, I didn't lead the situation very well. It was on me. And the shot started going in before she was fully ready and giving the start button. And anyway, it turned out where the horse goes, and I'm like, nope, hang on, hang on, hang on. And she's like, okay,
Yes.
I'll hang on here. And then it was beautiful. The vet didn't even know anything had gone differently or gone wrong, because to her, the horse stood perfectly still and was fine. For me on my side, I'm like, nope, she's telling me she didn't give her start button, but I'm going to help her out through this. And it went just fine. Um, but this is a horse that previously it would have not gone fine. So that was a really cool firsthand experience of what you were talking about, building that
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, I just had an experience like that too, and it was with Optimus, and it was with a blanketing situation, and with the really cold temperatures that we've been having. I was like, okay, we got to do this. Like you're showing signs of being cold and everything, and we were like literally almost there and so close, and it was a decision that I had to make like for his health, and I was like, we could like we'll just get this on real quickly, and it was not perfect, but as I was in that state of like, please just hold on just a second longer, I like saw him. He was just like, okay.
Okay, I'll do it for you, human.
Like,
Yeah.
okay, I deserve a good gift after this. But yeah, it was I saw that he was nervous and he was showing me that he was nervous, yet we have that history to where I was like, please just give me a second, and then it was all okay. But yeah, so I had an experience like that too.
Well, and it's important to reiterate that this was not like 2 months into the training. This is these both
Yeah,
these
yeah.
cases, both these horses, there's been a lot of time of putting the
Shit.
piggy.
Yeah.
And also both of these situations were like, could I have rescheduled the dentist thing? Yes, but she was already putting the shot in, so it's like in the moment I'm having to think fast, right? So I didn't really have time to adjust anything. And in your situation, we were talking about welfare, medical concern that if he gets cold, if, with the temperatures you guys were having, like that's probably pretty dangerous. So I would never do either of those things just for fun or like
Oh
early
no,
on
no,
in the
yeah.
training.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. And one other thing that came to mind that I kind of want to close out with is I want to, I, I feel like I preach this over and over again. I'm going to keep saying it till I'm blue in the face. You can never say a horse is not in pain. So a lot of times people will come to me and they're like, the vet said he's fine, but he's still fearful. And I'm like, well, I'm not denying that your vet couldn't find anything. That's very possible. And definitely, I mean, that's happened many times with my horses too. But that doesn't mean there isn't a source of pain or discomfort or something is going on. Your vet, as amazing as they are, because they are truly amazing. They have a very tough job and they do wonderful work. Cannot read your horse's mind and cannot tell you whether or not your horse is in pain. We can't even do that with another person. I can't tell
Yeah.
you whether you're in pain. You can't tell me whether I'm in pain. Um, so we really do have to listen to our horse's behavior and keep going, keep looking for possible causes and and just keep trying to work through ways to help support them and yeah, just kind of go down the checklist of like, okay, well, we worked with the nutritionist. That's we're 6 months in from those changes and things aren't looking any better. Let's try hoof stuff. Maybe we need to make some adjustments there. Like we keep working down that. So this is where working with a behavior consultant is really valuable for helping narrow down that stuff and to help you get to troubleshoot and problem solve those things a little bit faster because we have a lot of experience in helping with cases like this. Um, but yeah, so we're at the end of our time for today, but this was a really great conversation about positive reinforcement with fearful horses and then talking about underlying pain causes. It's funny how it always ties back to that and underlying like causes for behavior, period, not just pain. But yeah, thank you so much, Megan, and we will see you guys in the next video.